Before we ride into this story, hit like and subscribe. Thank you. January 25th, 1969. Phoi Village, Mekong Delta. 90 American infantrymen are flattened into an open rice paddy like someone took a giant hand and pressed them into the mud. They've been there for 2 hours, not hiding, pinned, locked in place by a North Vietnamese machine gun bunker that is close enough to kill them but clever enough to stay unseen. They can hear it though, that steady mechanical hate. Tat 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 tat, like a sewing machine stitching death across the waterlogged field. 5 are already dead, including the company commander. The radio is a tangle of frantic voices, broken transmissions, shouted grid coordinates that keep getting corrected because nobody can agree on where the bunker actually is, only where the bullets are coming from. The living are running low on ammunition. Their faces are smeared with sweat and mud, mouths tasting like iron because fear does that, turns your tongue into metal. Overhead, Cobra gunships circle like sharks, sleek and angry, but they can't bite without hitting the Americans hugging the dirt 50 meters from the unseen bunker. The pilots want to help. They can't. The angle is wrong. The blast radius is wrong. The math is unforgiving. Artillery is useless here too. The bunker is dug deep, reinforced like a fist clenched under the earth. Infantry can't maneuver. Every time someone tries to crawl, the paddy erupts with tracer fire and another body goes still. From above, everyone watching knows the truth. They're dying in place. And then something appears in the open doorway of an OH-6 Loach scout helicopter. Small, bubble canopy, the kind of aircraft that looks like it should be taking tourists over beaches, not hovering above a battlefield. It isn't a rocket pod. It isn't a new weapon system. It's a white Stetson hat. The kind you'd see in an old cavalry painting. Sun-bleached brim, high crown, a silhouette that doesn't belong in 1969 Vietnam. For a second, it looks almost ridiculous. Then the Loach drops like a stone. The pilot, First Lieutenant Allan Ace Kazalo, dives the helicopter down to 10 feet above the bunker. 10 feet. So low the rotor wash kicks dust off sandbags and flattens nearby grass like a sudden storm. Machine gun fire tears upward. The bubble canopy becomes a snapping, cracking spiderweb of plexiglass. The aircraft shudders with impacts. Thin aluminum skin hit again and again, a tin can being punched by invisible fists. And Kazalo doesn't pull away. He doesn't hover at a safe distance. He doesn't mark the target and retreat. He doesn't call for another run. He lands, right on top of the bunker. The skids settle onto sandbags. The Loach wobbles for half a heartbeat, as if even the helicopter can't believe what it's doing. Kazalo's crew chief is already moving. Door open, boots on the roof of the bunker like it's the hood of a truck. He yanks a grenade from his vest, pulls the pin and drops it into the firing port with the calm precision of a man tossing a coin into a jar. Then he dives back into the helicopter. Kazalo pulls pitch hard. The Loach lifts, and the bunker explodes beneath them. A brutal orange bloom. Dirt and smoke erupt like the earth coughing up everything it's been holding. The blast wave slaps the helicopter, rocking it in the air. Bits of sandbag and shattered wood flick upward like confetti from hell. Then, silence. The machine gun stops. Down in the rice paddy, 90 men hold their breath without realizing it. It's the kind of pause that happens when your brain refuses to accept good news. When you've been under a hammer for so long, you forget what quiet feels like. Then someone whispers, "We're alive." And the whisper spreads like a spark, because they are. They're alive because a helicopter pilot from a cattle ranch decided the rulebook was optional, and that sometimes you don't solve a problem from a distance, sometimes you land on it. That moment wasn't a one-time burst of insanity. It was the purest expression of who Allan Ace Kazalo had always been, the most unconventional scout pilot in the Vietnam War. The guy who went AWOL from a hospital just to get back to combat. The guy who captured enemy soldiers with a Civil War cavalry saber. The guy shot down again and again 6 times in 18 months and kept climbing back into the cockpit like crashing was just a minor inconvenience. He wasn't supposed to be a pilot, he was supposed to be running cattle. Kazalo was born in 1946 along the California-Oregon border, raised in the kind of country where fences break, engines fail, storms roll in without warning, and nobody comes to save you unless you save yourself first. He grew up on horseback, fixing problems with his own hands, learning early that hesitation costs more than action. So when he got drafted in 1966, he didn't resist. He leaned into it like a man stepping into a saddle. Armor officer candidate school at Fort Knox, a commission as a second lieutenant, and then, almost casually, he volunteered for helicopter flight school. Flying came naturally to him, not because he was some magical prodigy, but because he understood something most people miss. A helicopter is like a horse. You don't fight it, you work with it, you feel it. You listen to what it's telling you through vibration, through balance, through the way it wants to move. When you're good, it's not a machine anymore. It's an extension of your nerve endings. Kazalo graduated in October 1967 and shipped to Vietnam 2 months later. December 1967, Dong Tam Bas Camp. He was assigned to Delta Troop, 3rd Squadron, 5th Cavalry. Attached to the 9th Infantry Division in the Mekong Delta, they had a nickname, the Bastard Cav, because they weren't attached to a cavalry division. Orphans operating independently, which suited them just fine. line. They had their traditions too. Yellow scarves, white Stetsons, a nod to old horse cavalry. Most pilots wore it like a joke, like a costume piece. Kazalo didn't. He showed up in what looked like the past itself, a full cavalry outfit, blue coat with brass buttons, yellow silk scarf, white Stetson, and strapped to his belt. A genuine Civil War era cavalry saber. Not for show, for use. While other pilots thought of themselves as aviators, Kazalo thought of himself as a cavalryman who happened to ride a helicopter instead of a horse. The old cavalry didn't survive by staying far away. They survived by getting close, by charging, by forcing the enemy to panic, by turning boldness into a weapon. To him, the Loach was just a faster horse. And if the mission demanded getting closer than doctrine allowed, then you got closer. His call sign was War Wagon 10, and it fit, because what Kazalo did in an OH-6 Loach wasn't reconnaissance, it was a fight. The OH-6 Loach was tiny, 2 seats, bubble canopy, a flying fishbowl. The design philosophy was simple: observe from above, mark targets, call in gunships. Kazalo ignored the philosophy. He flew treetop level, sometimes lower, skimming rice paddies so close the rotor wash parted the water, revealing hidden tunnel openings underneath, sliding along canals where his door gunner could peer into shadowed banks, hovering near tree lines close enough that if someone fired at him, the muzzle flash was practically within arm's reach. People called it bravery. Kazalo called it logic. At high altitude, the Loach was slow and vulnerable. At low altitude, it could turn inside a gunner's panic. His theory was brutal and simple. Get so close the enemy freaks out, make them shoot badly, make them reveal themselves, then let the Cobras overhead erase them. This was pink team work. White scout helicopter down low drawing fire, red gunships above delivering punishment. White plus red equals pink. It worked, and it cost blood. In his first 18 hours of combat flying, 18 hours, Kazalo was shot down. The Loach fell hard, metal screaming, rotor blades biting air until they didn't. When he woke, his jaw was broken and wired shut. He was evacuated to the 106th General Hospital in Japan for surgery. Standard procedure was clear: recover in Japan, then rotate back to the States. War over. Kazalo refused. While his jaw was still wired, he walked out of that hospital like a man leaving a bad hotel. He found a C-130 cargo plane heading back to Vietnam and climbed aboard without permission. Technically, it was AWOL, court-martial territory. He didn't care. His unit was fighting. He was a pilot. The math was simple. When he landed back at Dong Tam, he walked into the operations tent, jaw wired, face still swollen, and reported for duty like he'd merely stepped out for coffee. His commanders could have crushed him for it. Instead, they put him back in a cockpit. Because in a war where skilled pilots were scarce, a man willing to escape a hospital to fly combat missions was exactly the kind of crazy you didn't waste. Over the next 18 months, Kazalo would be shot down 5 more times and walk away from every crash. The crew started calling him invincible, not because he never got hit, but because he never stayed down. Another scout pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Hugh L. Mills Jr., later said Kazalo was the eternal cavalryman, the real deal. Mills understood because he'd lived the same world. The Loach flown too low, the hospitals escaped, the thin line between reckless and necessary. In the Mekong Delta, the safe way could get you killed just as efficiently as the reckless way. The difference was, the reckless way sometimes won. There was another reason Kazalo became a legend. He didn't just fight from the air, sometimes he got out. September 1968, a scout flight spots an enemy soldier who dives into a canal and disappears into murky water. Standard procedure says, mark it, move on. Kazalo lands. He steps out wearing his Stetson like it belongs there, draws his cavalry saber, and wades into the canal, probing the mud with the blade, poking like a fisherman hunting something that doesn't want to be found. The water is thick, alive with rot and reeds. Then the blade hits something solid. A man erupts from the water, gasping. He'd been breathing through a reed, a Viet Cong trick for hiding from helicopters. Kazalo marches him back at sword point, makes him stand on the landing skid, and flies him to base like he's hauling a stolen calf. There's a photo. It happened. When someone asked him why he'd go to that trouble, Kazalo shrugged with the wired jaw bluntness of a man who doesn't romanticize anything. Scouts got beer and soda credits for prisoners, he said. We got pretty good at it. That was Kazalo in a sentence. Deadly serious, oddly casual, and completely uninterested in doing things the normal way. But those canal captures, those stories, were a sideshow. The main event was January 25, 1969. Charlie Company, 5th Battalion, 60th Infantry is crossing an open rice paddy near Phuai Village when the bunker opens up. The company commander drops instantly. 4 more men go down in the first burst. The rest hit the dirt and can't move. Every attempt to crawl is punished. Every lifted head invites a line of tracers. 2 hours, 90 men pinned. They try everything. Cobras make gun runs. Too close to friendlies, they have to break off. Artillery can't get the angle. Infantry tries to maneuver. More wounded. Ammunition dwindles. The wounded are bleeding, calling for medics who can't reach them. And that bunker keeps firing, steady and confident, like it has all day. Then Kazalo arrives. Not in the Loach at first. He's overhead in an AH-1 Cobra, circling, studying, not just looking at the enemy, but reading the geometry. He sees the distance, 50 meters. He sees the problem. Any weapon powerful enough to kill the bunker risks killing the Americans. Rockets? Too much blast. Cannon? Not precise enough here. Artillery? Wrong angle, wrong dirt, wrong everything. But Kazalo sees one weapon weapon that can get close enough, a human being. He lands his Cobra, climbs out, walks over to a waiting Loach like a man switching horses, and takes off again. Back over the paddy he drops low, 10 feet above the bunker, practically scraping it with roto-wash. The bunker's gunner tries to elevate, tries to swing upward, but the weapon was built to fire horizontally across a field, not vertically at a helicopter sitting on its roof. The firing port faces outward, not up. The enemy inside has never trained for this. The Americans below watch in disbelief. Someone later said it was like watching a man commit suicide in slow motion. But Kazalo isn't committing suicide, he's doing math. He sets the skids down on sandbags. His crew chief moves like he's rehearsed it 100 times. Door open, jump, grenade, pin out, drop through the firing port, scramble back. Kazalo yanks pitch. They lift off. The bunker detonates beneath them, and the machine gun dies in an instant. Silence rolls out over the rice paddy like a tide going out. Then the world returns, shouts, breathing, radios crackling with voices that suddenly sound like they've been given a second life. Kazalo doesn't even leave. He lands again near the pinned infantry, climbs out, and briefs the ground commander right there, pointing, gesturing, describing enemy positions and the best routes like he's drawing a map in the air. Then he's back in the cockpit, back in the fight, switching to the Cobra to provide overhead fire support until the area is secured. When it's over, a general officer who'd been watching from a command and control helicopter lands immediately. Right there on the battlefield, with smoke still hanging and men still shaking, the general promotes Kazalo on the spot and awards him a Silver Star in the field, recommending him for even higher recognition. Months later, Kazalo receives the Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's second highest award for valor. People call it extraordinary heroism. That's one way to say it. Another way is this: 90 men went home because one pilot decided safe was a luxury they couldn't afford. Kazalo's war didn't slow down after that. 2 tours, 18 months total, over 1,000 combat flight hours in his first year alone, more than most people spend behind the controls in a lifetime. He received nearly everything the Army could give: the Distinguished Service Cross, a Silver Star, multiple Distinguished Flying Crosses, Purple Hearts, air medals, honors stacked like poker chips. And still he wanted to go back again. The Army refused him a 3rd tour. Officially, they said he was too valuable and too reckless. Unofficially, the rumor was that he'd crossed too many invisible lines, pursuing enemy forces into places American helicopters weren't supposed to go, flirting with borders and rules like they were suggestions. Translation: he was effective and impossible to contain, so they kept him stateside. He stayed in the Army, rose to lieutenant colonel, and eventually commanded an aviation training battalion at Fort Rucker. The same low-level, aggressive scout tactics he'd pioneered in the Mekong Delta, using the helicopter as bait, turning proximity into advantage, became standard doctrine. Ideas born in mud and tracer fire got printed into handbooks and taught to new pilots as if they were always obvious. Even in peacetime, Kazalo stayed Kazalo. At staff college, while other officers carried briefcases, he carried saddlebags. At civic events, he sometimes wore that old cavalry uniform, not as a joke, but as identity. Always a cowboy, always cavalry, but war takes payment eventually, even from men who seem built to dodge bullets. In the mid-1980s, Kazalo contracted a rare virus that damaged his heart: cardiomyopathy, progressive weakening, the slow betrayal of muscle that can't be argued with. After 20 years, the Army medically retired him. He went back to California, tried to live like the man he was supposed to be. He competed in team roping with his brother. He taught. He kept moving because stopping felt like surrender. But his heart kept failing. By 1993, he could barely function. He moved to Portland, Oregon to await a heart transplant. On April 27th, he received a new heart. The surgery went well. Doctors were optimistic. Then days later, the new heart failed. Massive heart attack. Allan Ace Kazalo died at 46 years old. A man who survived 6 shootdowns in Vietnam, crashes that should have killed him, risks that should have ended him, was finally brought down by the one thing he couldn't outfly: his own heart. Years later, his name didn't fade the way names usually do, because the men in that rice paddy didn't forget, pilots who flew with him didn't forget, and the Army itself, slow, bureaucratic, cautious, couldn't fully ignore what he'd done. In the 2000s, there were renewed efforts by survivors and supporters to see his Distinguished Service Cross upgraded, arguing that what happened near Phuai Village wasn't just bravery, it was the kind of battlefield decision that changes the outcome of history one life at a time. Whether medals change or don't, the truth remains carved into the memories of the people who watched a Loach land on a bunker roof. Ace Kazalo redefined what a scout helicopter could be. He turned a fragile observation platform into an offensive weapon. He taught himself to fly lower, closer, and more aggressively than anyone thought sane, and proved that sometimes the difference between disaster and survival isn't better equipment. It's someone willing to do something nobody else will do. And he did it wearing a Stetson, carrying a saber, and flying like the sky was open range. Today, aircraft like the MH-6 Littlebird carry forward the same spirit: fast, low, aggressive, special operations pilot pilots skimming rooftops and tree lines in places most people will never see. They don't wear cavalry uniforms, they don't carry swords, but in the way they fly, the refusal to stay distant, the willingness to press close, to accept risk so someone else doesn't have to, there's an echo of a cowboy scout pilot in the Mekong Delta who looked at a bunker killing 90 men and decided, I'm not going to circle this problem, I'm going to land on it. And that spirit doesn't die, it just finds a new helicopter, and a new pilot brave enough to take it lower than anyone else dares.